Good evening. My name is Cubby Selby, and I am an alcoholic.
Hey, Cubby.
I'm delighted to be here. I guess I get over here 3 or 4 times a year, and I always enjoy this room. Nice. You people look like drunks. It's a meeting in Pacoima that's like that, too. You don't smell like them, but you look like them. Anyway, I'm delighted to be here. As I said, I'm a drunk, and I'm an alcoholic that never drank in high school, and I never drank in college. I'm an alcoholic that never went to high school, and I never went to college. But I learned how to drink the same way we all did, unsuccessfully. From one point of view, from another point of view, quite successfully. If it wasn't for alcohol, I wouldn't be alive. I love booze. Oh, do I dearly, dearly love booze. Obviously, alcohol had to do a whole lot for me in order for me to be willing to let it do so much to me. And ultimately, it destroyed everything that I held of value in my life. To put it as simply as possible, I didn't do all the loving, kind things I always wanted to do, and I did all the rotten, mean-spirited things I knew no human being should ever do. But in between, oh man, oh, it's such a joy. For me, it's not a coincidence that the word spirit means God and it means booze. Because if you're anything like me, drinking was a spiritual experience. Oh, boy. See, I never know what is happening to me at the moment it's happening. It's only in retrospect that I have any idea of what has happened in my life. So I never knew what was going on with me and within me as a kid. And I had no way of really describing any of these things for myself or defining them until I got sober. And then with the tools and principles made available for me here, I was able to examine my life and realize certain things. But I was always overwhelmed with feelings my entire life. And I never knew what they were, but I knew I shouldn't have them. They were rotten, they were dirty. They were dirty. And I come to find out, yeah, they were. Oh, it's fun. I was born a dirty old man, but what the hell are you gonna do? But so I was always like a scream looking for a mouth. So I was just always overwhelmed with these feelings. And I had no idea that I was overwhelmed with a sense of shame and guilt and inadequacy. I had no concept of these things. I didn't have those words. I just couldn't imagine what was going on. And I had no idea whatsoever that I knew that I was so evil and so rotten I didn't deserve to live. And I could never find a way to live in my own skin, no less live in this rotten, miserable, contemptible world. But the worst thing of all, I realize now, was feeling separated from myself. Now that is something that is absolutely unbearable, and I have no idea that's what I'm feeling. I'm born with this feeling, and I have this all my life, so I have no way of defining it until something changes that feeling. Because I live in a world of duality. I have to have something with which to compare one thing with the other. And that's what booze did. I was always a tortured, tormented, fractured human being. But man, when I took a drink, oh, the angels sing. Oh, I take a drink and I become one whole, solid, unified being. And I have a sense of peace that I never knew existed. It's absolutely glorious. But in every gin mill I've ever been in, there's always some creep that crawls in somehow and says, you shouldn't drink. I mean, it's just enough to drive you to drink, these people. Now, things are explained. I'm a blackout drinker. As a matter of fact, when I was a kid, I blacked out before the first drink on a few occasions. I was very intense in my thirst. So there's always somebody that will explain to you what you did the night before. So I have to accept the simple fact that my drinking may be a problem for you. But believe me, man, it's the answer for me. It answers everything. And if it doesn't answer it, I don't care anyway. You know, hey, Mama, God. But it's true, I drink, blackout, and I might kill you. But man, that's the chance I got to take. I'm willing to take that chance. I mean, one Yahoo more or less is no big deal. You're going to go belly up someday anyway. It doesn't make any difference. I'll do anything to experience that sense of peace and that sense of unity. Absolutely anything. So I cannot accept that I'm powerless over alcohol, because as far as I'm concerned, it is the answer to every human living problem I have ever encountered. I left home at 15. I went to sea. I was a merchant seaman during the Second War. By the time I was 18, I was in a hospital in Germany. They said I couldn't live more than 2 months. I had TB and both lungs were totally destroyed. I just literally didn't have any lungs. Yet a couple of weeks before this particular day, while going through the canal in Antwerp, I jumped off the ship. I ran to a wine shop and I got all the wine I could carry, and I ran back to the ship. Now, it wasn't a great distance, but today I look upon the fact that I ran that distance without any lungs as rather significant. Non-alcoholics don't do that, I assure you, just for 4 or 5 bottles of wine. But see, they don't understand singleness of purpose the way I do. I am a highly motivated man. When I need a drink, I need a drink. And I couldn't see where this indicated I have an abnormal relationship with alcohol. I couldn't afford to see that. I must defend my right to drink at all costs. And I couldn't accept that my life had become unmanageable. Yet by the time I was 22 years old, I had spent more than 3 years in bed, almost 4 years in the hospital. I had 10 ribs cut out. I had 1 lung collapsed, a piece of the other lung cut out. And they used an experimental drug to keep me alive. And it impaired my vision and my hearing. My inner ear was almost totally destroyed, and I couldn't walk properly, and I'd fall down in the dark. All my muscles were petrified from this drug, and it fried my brain. It destroyed whatever brain cells I had left. And then I got hepatitis in the blood transfusions. And then things started to get bad. Oh man, I'll tell you, there is nothing that can't be made worse by drinking. Absolutely nothing. And this is a guarantee, it's an absolute guarantee. You cannot prevent the progression of alcoholism. It's a progressive illness, and I don't care what you do or don't do, every day it gets worse and worse. But I can't see these things because periodically drinking was doing wonders for me. It was transporting me to a world that I never knew existed, and I never knew I really wanted to be there until I got there. Now I don't want to leave. It's wonderful. So I can't accept that I'm powerless over alcohol. My life has become unmanageable. Now I've always known in my innermost self that I'm powerless and I can't drink. So in order to keep that information away from my awareness, I had to develop a belief system of lies. I had to teach myself what is true is false and what is false is true. The basic lie being that alcohol is the answer, not the problem. And one of the things I did to defend my right to drink was use heroin. And I developed a heroin sobriety maintenance program for myself. And it proved conclusively to me that I am not an alcoholic. Because you can't possibly be an alcoholic if you're shooting $100 a day worth of stuff and only getting drunk once or twice a month or whenever necessary. So from that point of view, this program worked wonders. However, it did get a little expensive and kind of habitual, you know. Now, the second step, of course, implies that we're nuts. And what I did is I left New York and I moved to Hollywood to get away from drugs. And because I'm so sincere, it worked. To make a long story short, I got busted, they strapped me down in solitary, and I kicked my habit. I wasn't expecting to do it that way. But I'll tell you one thing, man, it's kind of a no-frills approach, but it's guaranteed. I don't care what it is you want to stop doing, you'll stop. I remember when they strapped me down, I knew I was going to die because I knew I couldn't. My lung just stops working under these conditions. You know, it's just I've had it. I'm not breathing. You know. And then 3 days later, I was afraid I wasn't going to die. I get very uncomfortable. Oh man. Anyway, after a week, they asked me if I wanted to come out, and I said no. I can't tell you how safe I felt locked in that cell. You know, they're not extraordinarily large. You can't get lost in them. It's kind of snug, you know. Homey. It's kind of homey, you know. Now, I still was incapable of associating any of my problems with my drinking. But I knew that I was doing something that was creating the madness in my life. I didn't know how or why, but I knew I was doing something. And I knew I couldn't do anything to me locked in there. So I stayed in there a month, and then they kicked me out, put me with population for a month. And then somebody bailed me out, put me in a hospital for a month. And then suddenly I was back out on the streets. That same world I've never understood, the same world I've never been able to live in. Only this time I hadn't had a drink for 90 days. And I can no longer really believe in the belligerence and hostility that I always generated to hide my fear from you and from me. And I was so terrified that I couldn't go through an intersection unless I was going for a drink. That was the only motivation that would get me across the street. And that went on for 15 months, and a woman I was living with brought another woman home with 3 children because they had no place to live. So we moved them in. This fellow used to come and visit this woman. And one Friday night he came and he visited with me. Now, as I've said, I'm a blackout drinker, so I don't remember more than a total, perhaps, of 30 seconds from the entire evening. And I think he was there all night. I remember him coming into the room and sitting down, and the next thing I remember is he got up and he walked over to where I was sitting, and he dropped a book in my lap. And he said, "I'm tired. You read to me." So I assumed from that remark that he had been reading to me, but I have no conscious memory of that. And I remember taking this book, putting it on the table, opening it up, and then I was back in the blackout. That's all I remember. But it turned out that I read from the book Alcoholics Anonymous. Obviously, I hadn't read the entire text. But what I did, I guess, was recognize the problem. I identified with the problem and recognized the answer. And obviously you can't recognize an answer until you have identified the problem. And the next night he took me to a meeting, and I've been sober ever since. And that was the 29th of March, 1969. And a couple of things happened in the next few hours that forced me to believe that miracles are possible without my consent. And believe me, I'm delighted to know that. Because given the nature of my alcoholic personality, you know what I would tell you to do with the miracle, you know, and how far up. I would forever be at the airport waiting for my ship to come in, because that's just the kind of person I am. But I don't have to consent to the miracle. It's It's something that's freely given. However, I've come to believe absolutely that at some point I need to make a conscious decision to cooperate with that miracle if I want to experience it for the rest of my life. So he takes me to this meeting, and oh man, did I hate this meeting. It was filled with a bunch of people with teeth hanging out like piano keys. It was abominable. All hysterical, all so goddamn happy you like to rip their head off this. Oh, God. And they love to talk about miracles and HPs and all that. Christ almighty, I couldn't believe grown people doing these things. And there was only one thing I knew at that meeting, when I left that meeting. One thing I knew absolutely, that I am not an alcoholic. That was the one thing I knew with absolute certainty. Yet that night I was given a gift of sobriety. The obsession to drink was removed, and I've been sober since that night. I didn't know the obsession was removed. I didn't even know I had an obsession in the first place. But for me, that's how I define grace in my life, because I hear that a lot in AA. So through the grace of God. Now, whatever that, I don't know what people mean by that, but I'm the kind of person that's always demanding of myself that I define my terms. And for me, what grace is in my personal life is simply, I was given a period of time where I could get physically free of alcohol. And then I could make a sober decision, do I want to stay sober? Or do I want to go back to drinking? I had the grace of being able to make that decision while not under the direct influence of any chemical whatsoever in my body. So this guy takes me home from the meeting, a meeting I hate and loathe and despise. And I don't know that I've already been given the gift of sobriety. And he takes me home, and I heard myself say, can I go to another meeting? And when I said that, I took the second step. Now, I had no intention of saying that, believe me. And I've come to realize that I did not say that. Not the I that I identified as Cubby at that particular moment in my life. I believe that Cubby consisted of this body, the mind, and all those hideous and heinous thoughts that went through my mind. I believe they defined me. So naturally I was terrified of me, and I loathed and despised me. But there's so much more to me than that. There is at the very least an inner spirit. And that inner spirit recognized a power in that room that could restore me to sanity. And it spoke those words through me. And the man said yes, and as I say, I've been sober ever since. Now, the next morning, I got up and I started my day in the usual manner. I started a fight with this woman I was living with in order to justify storming out of the house and getting drunk. See, I know in my innermost self I can't drink. So I have to justify it in some way. I mean, I usually drank at people, but I would drink at anything. I'd drink at the weather, traffic lights, earthworms. It didn't make any difference. As long as I could feel justified in doing what I know in my heart I have no business doing. So I started a fight. I went storming out of the house, and I was standing on the corner waiting to cross the street. And that same voice that I've heard screaming in my head my entire life was screaming at me that morning. Yet on the basis of that one AA meeting, 2 words were changed in that lifelong litany. And it said, I'll show her. I won't drink. I'll stay sober. And my body turned around and went back to the house. And that morning, the second step took me. I was restored to sanity. Now, I have been mad as a hatter most of my sobriety. And I use that word deliberately, consciously, mad as a hatter. But I have been totally and absolutely sane with respect to alcohol since that moment. And how I define sanity is very simple. I can no longer believe the lies necessary to believe in order to justify taking the first drink. I could no longer believe that drinking would improve the quality of my life in any way. I've been totally and absolutely sane with respect to alcohol since that moment. I don't limit the sanity available to just that. But if you're alcoholic, obviously without that foundation of sanity, no other form and or degree of sanity is possible. But with that foundation, every form and every degree is not only possible, but it is absolutely infinite. It is infinite possibility. So the second step took me, and I go back to the house, and I don't drink for 30 days, that period of grace. For 30 days I don't drink. At the end of 30 days, I am stark raving sober. As we all know, there is only one thing worse than drinking, and that's not drinking. That's the only thing that's worse. I mean, why else are we here on a Sunday night, man? And the book is very specific about that. Among other things, it says, we realize the bottle is only a symbol. We have a living problem. I don't know how to live without booze. I just don't know how to. It's not just like drinking does these wonders for me. Just thinking about it sometimes. Just knowing, well, it's only 8 o'clock, but in another 7 hours, I can have a drink. Just get you through the day, knowing sooner or later you can have a drink. Or maybe there's some vanilla extract nobody has noticed or something, whatever. Something that doesn't smell too bad on your breath. Oh, it's a wonder. It's an absolute wonder. But I can't do that anymore, I just can't do that. So at the end of 30 days, I'm stark raving sober, and the reason for that is you take away the most important thing in someone's life. You must replace it with something of value, because nature cannot and will not accept a vacuum. Alcohol had become the most important thing in my life. When you take alcohol out of my life, I'm left with that dark, black, cancerous sense of separation that I started with. And it is absolutely unbearable. I can't live with that. And if you don't replace it with something of value, I must and will drink. I have absolutely no choice in the matter. I am powerless over alcohol, and alcohol is the only thing in my living memory that has ever appeared to heal that unbearable sense of separation. And I believe Alcoholics Anonymous is that something of value that fills that hole and fulfills every need I shall ever have for the rest of my life. So after 30 days, again, this inner self made a decision that we need help. We need to stay sober. We need to cooperate with this miracle. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it. I have come to believe that what we call life is very simple. It is simply a series of decisions, actions, and results. The results are always inevitable, at times predictable. I've also come to believe that somehow I made a decision to be unaware of my decisions. Therefore, what happens in my life, I'm not responsible for. Everything I do is somebody else's fault. Thank you, Freud. Oh, God. So good to know that, Oh, I got issues up the kazoo, man. Yeah. But I have to make these decisions. You have decided you want what we have, and are willing to go to any lengths to get it. So this inner self has made the decision. We have to cooperate with this miracle, and gets me to take the appropriate action. I went to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and asked for help, and the help was instantly and automatically there. And the reason for that is simple and obvious, but unfortunately it's the simple and obvious that's invisible to me. And the reason that the help is instantly and automatically there is that the answer is in the asking. You cannot have a problem without already having the answer. It is a spiritual impossibility to have a problem without having the answer. However, I still have this belief system of lies that I nurtured to protect my right to drink. So periodically I am unaware of already having what it is I am so desperately looking for. But when I come up to you and say, help me, tell me what to do, I've given up, I've surrendered. Now I don't know that, I would never define that as such when I went to the meeting and asked for help, but that's exactly what I did. And instantly the answer, which is always and only within me, and there's never an answer outside of me for me. The only thing that exists outside of Cubby for Cubby is an opportunity for me to give everything away. But when you say life is an inside job, it's a simple statement of fact. Life is an inside job. So when I ask for help, I've given up, and instantly the answer, which is within me, can transcend that belief system of lies. And then when you share with me what you did at that point in your sobriety, you make it possible for me to recognize the answer in whatever way I need to stay sober for the next 24 hours. So after 30 days, I asked for help, and I was given the gift of recovery. Now I have a sticky wicket. I'm face to face with that three-letter word. And the kindest thing I ever said about God is that it's dog spelled backwards. After my last operation, I was in a coma for 4 days. At some point in that period, I opened my eyes as a chaplain walked in the room. And I stayed conscious long enough, maybe 2 or 3 seconds, just long enough to shake my head no and watch him leave. Because I knew he was there to give me the hocus pocus, and I didn't want to have anything to do with it. Because I was determined that if I died, I was going to die giving God the finger. And if there was such a thing called God, I couldn't wait to meet it, spit in its face, and tell the weasel what I thought of it. They tell me that's an attitude. Yeah, what are you going to do? And you have to remember, I was still a teenager when this was going on. So it's not that years of drinking brought about this rotten attitude. It's just this rotten attitude made years of drinking an absolute necessity. You know? You can't live with an attitude like that without drinking. I don't think. I obviously didn't try it. So anyway, so I'm face to face with this thing called the third step, and I don't know what to do. I ask people about it, and it's not until years later that I realized that as soon as I asked someone, how do you do it, it meant I had already done it. But I can't see these things at the time. So it only asks me to make a decision, which obviously I have already made. I ask you how to do it. And then as the book says, I must be followed with a program of vigorous action, referring to the inventory, and that's what I did. I started on my inventory, and then it seemed like everybody was talking about prayer, prayer, prayer. I had no idea what to do about that. So I ended up copying the third step prayer and the St. Francis prayer, and I tacked them on the wall. And wake up in the morning, I'd read them, go about my business, and at night I'd read them again and go to sleep. Then it seemed like everyone was saying you have to kneel and pray, so I tried it. 20 and 30 times a day I tried to kneel and pray, and I couldn't do it. My knees were having nothing to do with this business. They just wouldn't bend. They were fused or something. They just didn't have anything to do with this kind of stuff. And then when I was sober 4 months, I took the fifth step. When I finished, my sponsor showed me the pages in the book to read that tell you exactly what to do for 6 and 7. Now at home, did as the book suggests. And when I had taken the sixth step, I was made aware of it. Now I've come to believe the essence of the sixth step is simply that when there's no longer a payoff in the defect, I am willing to let it go. It seems to me I've had the insane belief all my life that I could avoid pain by pursuing pleasure, never realizing the simple and obvious. They are one and the same thing. You can't separate pain from pleasure. It's absolutely impossible. What gives you pleasure one day will kill you the next. Just look how much pleasure there was in drinking one day, and in the wink of an eye, it's destroying you. Can't do it. See, I don't hold on to the pain of resentment. I don't want that pain. But what I cling to is the pleasure of judgment. Oh, going home after the meeting, sitting in my chair, sending the weasel out for a pizza, because who needs God when you're alone in your shrunken pumpkin head, more powerful than everything? Oh, the power, the power, the power. Oh, it's so glorious. Thinking that if I wake up in the middle of the night, all cramped up in a cold sweat because of this resentment, I'll just fall out of bed, get on my knees, and hocus pocus, God, take away the pain or it hurts. Man, here. I mean, I could just say, get on my face, schmuck. What do you want from my life? Try asking God to take away the pain. I'll give you some more pain. Enough pain till you realize that all you have to do is give up the pleasure and you will never experience the pain. You know? But who wants to give up the pleasure of judgment? But when there's no longer a payoff in the defect, I've found I'm willing to let it go. So it certainly isn't the defect I hold on to. It's some kind of payoff. Maybe it's no longer there. Maybe I can't see it, but at some point in my life, there was one big fat payoff. There was a pleasure of some sort in that defect. So when I had taken the 6th step, I was made aware of it. Without thinking, I was on my knees taking the 7th step. And that day I was given a gift of prayer. I've come to believe the gift of prayer is the most precious thing we're given by whatever this power is that created us. With the gift of prayer, it takes on a living reality in our lives. And I know from my experience as the prayer that there's nothing to get. There's only everything to give. And it's only in the process of giving it away that I become aware of having it in the first place. Until that moment, I'm convinced I don't have it and I can't do it. I don't have it and I can't do it. But if I just say yes to whatever life presents to me, I have found within me the infinite resources necessary to fulfill my responsibility to whatever life presents to me at any particular moment in my life. And I also know from my experience as the prayer that I don't pray to God, that there is absolutely nothing to pray to. But I pray from God, and it is all totally and absolutely an inside job. I believe the prayer that mends the broken hearts and heals the sick minds that we all bring to Alcoholics Anonymous is the song of love we sing to this thing called God. I believe that song is heard in every heart throughout the world and is heard throughout the entire universe. And with steps 10 and 11, we can not only sit and hear that song, but experience the simple truth that in all of the universe there is only one song, and we are that song. All of God's kids make up that song, and each and every note is just as important and just as vital as the other. No one note is more important, and obviously it's a song that is in constant change. So if I want to truly experience my place in that song, I have to let go of absolutely everything. With every breath, I change. And once you experience that song, what's to hold on to? So at the 7th step, I was given the gift of prayer. With the 9th step, I was given the gift of love. I've been given up for dead 4 times in the hospitals, numerous times in the streets. I don't know how many times in people's prayers. Please God, kill that son of a bitch. And the only thing that I believe that kept me alive was what I thought was my hatred for God. It literally animated me. And 6 months with you, it was turned into a love affair. Now, I didn't understand it at the time, but later I read Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age. In the back of that book, they quote an old philosopher. It's a little line that explained everything. The line says, those who deny God deny him because of their despair at not finding him. The first time I read that line, I understood my entire life. Absolutely everything, every heartbeat, every breath of my entire life. An old axiom says, the holiest ground in the world is where an ancient hatred has been turned into a current love. So because of what has happened for me in Alcoholics Anonymous, wherever I am standing on the holiest ground in the world. And I believe it is impossible to take the first 9 steps without standing on the holiest ground in the world. With the 12th step, I have this great gift, my own personal relationship with whatever this power is that created me. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. It's the only thing we're working towards and for. And it's a flat-out guarantee. You cannot take the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous without having a spiritual awakening. It is absolutely impossible. It's an inevitable and predictable result of those actions and those decisions preceding that step. And among other things, the word spirit simply means essence. The Latin root is spiritus. It means breath. So we're not dealing with some complicated and involved theological concept here. We're simply dealing with the essence of life, the very breath of life. And the book tells us precisely where we find this. The only one place we can find the great reality is deep within ourselves. There is no other place that this can be found, only deep within ourselves. And what I found here is not somebody else's concept of God. It is not some institution's concept of God. And it certainly isn't my concept of God. What I found here was the power of infinite and unconditional love that has revealed itself to me from within me as a direct result of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And wherever I am, all of this power is. I can never have less than everything there is. But the nature of obsession is to want more than everything there is. So obviously an obsession can never be satisfied. It can be surrendered, but it can never, ever be satisfied. Now, as I said, most of my sobriety, I've been mad as I had them. In many ways, my sobriety has been worse than my drinking. And those years of drinking had some difficulties, too. But the problem is, when I'm sober, I don't get to pass out occasionally or anything, you know. So I'm always around to inflict myself on you and on me. It's just dreadful. I battled my demons for many, many years until I learned how to honor them rather than battle. But until that day, I was just impossible to live with. And after being together for 15 years, my wife had to leave. You know, I'd stay locked in my room 2 or 3 days at a time, no food, no water, try and knock the house down with my head, you know, happy, joyous, and free, right? You can't. I mean, the only positive thing I can say, I wasn't trying to knock the house down with her head, you know. But you can't live with somebody like that. I mean, I can't live with me. How can anybody else live with me? So we had to separate, and we were back in Massachusetts at the time, and our son, who was 12, elected to stay with me. I hadn't worked in years. I had been physically sick as well as out of my head, so we had no money. And Billy and I came back to L.A. from Massachusetts and stayed with a friend until I got on welfare. And I got on welfare, and I got a little 2-room apartment for us. When we moved into that little place, we had 2 suitcases each. He had an old army cot somebody gave him to sleep on, and I had a piece of foam rubber to sleep on. And that was the extent of our stuff. I was 14 years sober. I was suddenly a single parent on welfare. And to this moment, I have no idea how I survived those years. I'd get up in the morning, I'd make breakfast for Billy, and we'd pray, we'd meditate, he'd go to school, and I'd just sit there and cry. I had no way of dealing with my life. I was just so totally, absolutely overwhelmed. Somehow, I didn't drink. I went to meetings and helped drunks, but I don't really know how I did that. And then I experienced the fellowship in a way that I never had before. Because you literally fed us, you clothed us, everything necessary for sustaining life came from the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, until that point in my life, I used to draw a very clear distinction within my own mind between the program and the fellowship. And I can no longer do that. I cannot separate you from me or us from the program or this power that gave us this program. We're all one or we're nothing as far as I'm concerned. That Christmas, I didn't know what I was going to do for Billy. It seemed so unfair that a 12-year-old kid wouldn't have a Christmas because of my illness. And what we ended up doing was going down to Skid Row and serving food to the people. And it was one of the greatest days of my life. He was so happy making sure the kids down there got extra pie and extra milk that he literally lit up all of Skid Row. And I was so overwhelmed with a sense of honor and privilege to be part of such a wonderful being as Billy. And while we were together, we did that at Christmas time. And one day my wife called and said she was in love with someone else. And by that time I was totally empty inside. I couldn't even cry. So we loved each other unconditionally when we separated. And I accepted the responsibility for her need to leave. So I wasn't consumed with these hideous kind of fantasies I've had in the past. I just had a heart that was broken and painful like I've never experienced in my life. And one morning I was praying for my wife and something most incredible happened. I heard myself thanking God that she had someone to love, that she had someone to share her life with, to share her body with, to share her program with, and to share her God with. Now I know I am not capable of formulating such a prayer, but I don't believe I need to. I believe my responsibility is to make the decision to love and then take the appropriate action. In this case, the appropriate action was prayer. And this is what I believe happened. I believe your love for me wrote that prayer. And you not only wrote the prayer, but you put the words in my heart, so that when my heart broke when my wife left, my heart broke open to the love that has always been in there, but I was unaware of it. And I could speak those words in prayer and experience the results of those words. I believe the love in Alcoholics Anonymous takes on an infinite number of forms. See, when I got here like everyone else, insulated and isolated in the eye of alcoholism. And I get here, and the very first word of the program is we. We admit it. We not only admit each other to these rooms, we admit each other to our hearts. And instantly, the eye of my disease starts to become a part of the we of Alcoholics Anonymous. And in time, as we continue to practice these principles, we experience the one, the oneness of all life, from I to we to one. When I got here, you did not judge me by the appearance of my illness. You saw beyond the crazed, drunken beast that I believed I was. Beyond that, you saw a sober being. And within that sober being, you saw light, and you saw love. And you held that image of me in your mind as you nurtured me, you loved me, and most importantly of all, you allowed me to make every mistake I must make in order to learn what I need to learn to stay sober for the next 24 hours. And more as I continue to come back to you, I am becoming the image that you have of me, as you are becoming the image that I have of you. And together we are becoming the vision that God has of us. Thank you very much.